everybody like in the I guess DMV Twitter, I guess you can call them, but people in this area, we've always been very adamant about the talent that comes out of here, especially like in basketball. But it's a handful of us that are like, no, look, our football talent, you best not be sleeping on it either, like. But my thing is, I noticed that nobody had really told the story of this area. And I remember I was watching, and this is kind of when it first struck, when I was watching the NFL draft in April of this year, the 2020 NFL draft, and Chase Young got picked second. And I feel like he was the highest player born in the state of Maryland to get drafted that high, like up to that point. Like, I don't think we'd ever had a top two pick until he got picked.
In 2013, I went to New Orleans for the National Association of Black Journalists Convention. And during my time there, I spent a lot of times with the current students of Morgan State University. And I really valued that time because now I was the OG. The first time I went in 2013, I went with a lot of my friends that I was in college with. We had all just graduated. This time, it was a couple of us who were alum, but for the most part, I was in the thick of things with the current students. Well, my guest on today's show is somebody who was there. As a matter of fact, he was the youngest of the whole clique, and that is the one and only Devon Asbhy. In his short time on this earth, he's already traveled to the Dominican Republic to cover baseball academy, and he wrote about it, even taught them some English. He's graduated from Morgan State, and he is now a author. He wrote the book PG vs. MoCo. It's about the players that came from public schools. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is my episode, my conversation with Dev Ashby. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on the line today, I have a good brother, a fellow Morgan State graduate, one of my mentees, somebody who I am extremely proud of. I was already proud of him, but he is now an author, an official author of the book called PG vs. MoCo, a memoir of high school football in the shadow of the nation's capital, and that is the one and only Devon Asbhy. Dev, what's up, bro?
What's going on? What's good? What's good?
Man, I'm so proud of you. You have done, we're going to get into that later, but you have done so much, and you're not even 25 yet, are you?
No, not till March.
They're going to be using this book as reference material, and we'll get into it. But first and foremost, let's start. How you feeling? You know, we're in the midst of a pandemic with COVID-19. How are you feeling?
Well, I'm feeling good actually. Everybody in my family's healthy, so that's what's up. But actually, kind of just to jump into it a little bit real quick, the pandemic, I hate to say it's a blessing because it's not. I mean, it's a pandemic, but just the amount of free time I got because of it is probably the reason this book came to pass. Like, if we're not in the current predicament we're in, I probably wouldn't have. Well, not to say I wouldn't have, but it would have taken a much longer time probably to get this done. So I mean, I'm feeling pretty good. Like, just it's feeling pretty good.
A lot of people write. I see a lot of stuff on Twitter. Obviously, it's a lot of people airing their griefs about certain things that's happening during the pandemic. But there are threads where people are talking about things that are positive. So don't feel bad by saying essentially this is a blessing in disguise. It shows that life deals you lemons. You can make lemonade. But let's get into it. Morgan State University. What led you there?
Well, I would say initially they were one of the first schools, one of the only schools that accepted me, coming out of high school. Like, my grades weren't great. So I remember I had I guess I could call him a mentor, guidance counselor, I would say. His name was Dr. Robinson, and I can't remember if he started working my senior year, but I hadn't seen him till my senior year. And he started taking all the seniors on like college trips and stuff. And there was Morgan was having, they have their open houses every spring and usually in the fall as well. So he took us in the spring. I want to say of like March or April, around that time. And at that point, I still didn't have any acceptances from anybody yet. Like, I wasn't sure what my plans were after high school at that point. And so we're on this trip, and Morgan, you know how Morgan does it. The open house, they show up and show out. So I'm there, and we're walking around campus and seeing all the buildings and stuff. Some of them were kind of relatively new at that point back in 2014. And they're giving us the tour. Then they have like the show where the Greeks come out and where the band is playing. And at that point, when the band came out, I was hooked. By the time the band started playing, that's when I was like, no, I can see myself going here. I have to go here. Like, I have to get accepted here. They were doing on the spot admissions. So we filled out some paperwork, did some things. And then at the end of the tour, you figure out if you get in or not. And I got the letter, and the first word said, "Congratulations." And I didn't even have to read the rest. Like, I knew I was in at that point. And so, I was calling everybody, telling everybody and stuff. So fast forward 5 years later and graduated with my degree in multimedia journalism. And here we are now.
You bring up the fact, the band. Did you have a band in your high school?
Yeah, it. Okay, let me not drag them. But at the time, I really thought they was hitting it. But then I went to Morgan and I realized, like, no, it's like this is amazing, But I did have a band, and they actually had a tradition at my school where every Friday before football games, they would walk through the school playing the fight song. So, it was a pretty big deal.
Man, it's nothing like a band. You spent the quite time in Baltimore, so you know about Baltimore City College, and their band has performed at Morgan's homecoming. But when I was there, they were nothing like they were now. No offense, but from 2000 to about 2002, 2003, they were on top of the world. Like, the band at that time was on the level of an HBCU, almost. Obviously different skill set, but people was giving band scholarships. But did you always know that you wanted to study journalism?
Actually, I didn't. My thing was, just like a lot of young Black men, I wanted to play sports in college. I wanted to get a college scholarship and play at the next level. That's always, every young 14, 15-year-old's dream, right? So, but the funny thing with me is at my high school, I rode the bench all 3 years I played, and I didn't play my junior year. So,
Did you play football or basketball or baseball?
football, I was a football player.
That's what I thought. I was just double checking.
Yeah, I've loved football since I was a little bit of a late bloomer, but ever since I did become a fan of the game, I love it. Like, I could read it inside and out. But even though I just didn't get to play, I was, so when that went out, I was like, well, I want to find a way to stay around sports and stay around football in particular. And my thing was I was always good at telling people stats like, oh, he ran for this many yards and he leads the league in interceptions. He does this. He does like that. That was me. I'm that guy. So, and like I could just do it verbatim. Like I wouldn't need a paper in front of me. I could just be like, look, I read that and I was like, you know what? Let me combine this power of mine, you know, with I was always really good at writing like English papers. I always got A's. Teachers would always be like, man, this is some damn good work right here. So I'm like, let me combine something I'm good at with something I love. And then I was like, journalism, there we go. And then when I went to Morgan, it was like I wanted to do all sports all the time. And then I remember my freshman year, there was this seminar because Dean Wickham always got seminars and stuff, always bringing people to the school. And I can't remember the lady's name, but she was talking to us, and she was like, basically, they love well-rounded journalists, especially if you're doing sports. They love it when you're well-rounded. So you want to do stuff like start a blog. You want to cover every story, like the stories that people aren't covering. You want to do that. So when I joined the spokesman paper at Morgan, I started covering stuff. People wasn't like, oh, who wants to do this? And nobody would raise their hand. I'd be like, me, I'll do it. So that's kind of how I got here.
When you look back, obviously hindsight being 2020, do you think high school would have been different had you known that you wanted to do journalism? Do you think maybe you would have taken more journalism classes, perhaps, or maybe you would have wrote the book sooner, or even had a balance between playing football and being a journalist on a team or something like that?
Honestly, I don't think I would have changed anything.
Okay.
Just because, like, the book coming, it probably wouldn't have changed either. But I think, like, I think it just kind of happened. Like, I always feel like God puts you in situations for a reason. So, like, even if you don't know what it is at the time, like, it's just stuff that you do, and it kind of just wraps around. Because I'm like, who'd have thought a dude that only got in games when we were blowing people out would just one day write a book about that experience? Like, I got to see everything. Even if I'm not playing,
Mhm.
I'm sitting here observing everything. So I remember all the stories. I remember certain plays, like some more than others. I remember the guys I played with. Like I saw things in practice like that people probably don't even remember. Like, so I've always been kind of like a visual person anyway. So I feel like, I mean, it definitely, I think it helped. And especially the writing, it gave me practice. Like, and coming in, because I went to one of the better schools, I guess, in the area. And so it definitely helped.
Rep your school, man. What school you went to?
I went to Seneca Valley High School. Wasn't the greatest
Okay.
4 years, but hey.
When you go back, who was the most famous or most notable person that you lined up against and that you saw and played with?
So the most notable person we lined up against, this wasn't in pads, but in a 7-on-7 tournament, my team played against Trayvon Diggs, who's the cornerback for the Cowboys now. So we played against him in a 7-on-7 tournament, like back when because he went to public school first, and then he transferred to private school when he was a junior. So I think I want to say his sophomore year, we played against him in the tournament, and the team he played for really actually wasn't that good, which is part of the reason I think he ended up transferring. But he was like, I mean, he was always in the papers. He was like an all-Met as a freshman. So like, dude was the real deal. And he had some dudes around him that were really good. They just didn't, for some reason, they couldn't put it all together. But I would say Trayvon Diggs was the most famous I lined up against. The one I lined up with, um, I say it's a couple of them because there's one guy Daniel Lapoux. He ended up going to Old Dominion. And he was there. He played defensive end, and he was probably one of the most athletic people I've ever seen. This guy Kevin Durant, who we nicknamed him Twos because he's named after his dad, and he's in the book as well. He was another guy. He was one of those, like, you see them a lot now where they line up in running back and receiver. He was one of those guys that was doing that back then. So two of them I say were the ones I lined up with that were most notable.
All right, cool, man. So usually I go chronological order in your career, but I want to get right into the book. We're still going to talk about your trip, but I want people to understand you went away. Um, like I said, it's not a game that you've been busy and you're not even 25 yet. But when did you decide to tackle this project? I'm always interested in asking people this. I produced a 7-part series, docu-series, and the idea started in September 2015. And finally, in September 2020, we was able to get it done. When did you decide to tackle this?
So for me, I always kind of in the back of my mind knew that one day I was going to write a book. And it's something like I posted on my pages on my social medias, like old Twitter messages and like old pictures of stuff. But like if you talk
I
to
remember you saying that.
yeah, if you talk to my close friends, like my inner circle, they'll always be like, he's always been talking about. And the joke was it was going to be a autobiography. It was going to be about me. But the point is, I knew I was going to write a book one day. I just didn't know what to write about. But for me, it was everybody like in the, I guess, DMV Twitter, I guess you can call them. But people in this area, we've always been very adamant about the talent that comes out of here, especially like in basketball. But it's a handful of us that are like, no, look, our football talent, you best not be sleeping on it either. Like, but my thing is I noticed that nobody had really told the story of this area. And I remember I was watching, and this is kind of when it first struck, when I was watching the NFL draft in April of this year, the 2020 NFL draft, and Chase Young got picked second. And I feel like he was the highest player born in the state of Maryland to get drafted that high, like up to that point. Like, I don't think we'd ever had a top two pick until he got picked. And don't quote me on that. I don't know how accurate it is, but it felt right. I remember seeing that somewhere. And so, and then in the draft in total, it was like 14 people from DC, Maryland, or Virginia. And if we are one state, that would have been third behind Texas and California. So at that point, I'm like, you know what? Like, that's right then and there. I was like, I got to do this project. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I just got to do it. Like, like, because I'm like, nobody's done it yet, and they've had ample time to do it. Nobody's done it. Nobody's talking about doing it. I haven't seen anything like, oh, soon to come, like nothing. So, you know, everybody likes being the first to do something. So, I mean, as it looks like right now, it looks like I'm probably the first or one of the first. And when I first started it, it was all over the place though. Like I was just writing as I went. Like I want to say when I first started, it was going to be just a bunch of random stats about, oh, we produce this many, and this is how you do it, and this and da, 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 da. And then as I kept going, I made the decision that I'm going to write about public schools because private schools they get enough love. Like we know about the math already. We know about good counsel. Like we see them on ESPN and everywhere else. We know about Calvert Hall up in Baltimore, Gilman, all these public schools, but I mean private schools, but like you look at the public schools, especially in like PG County in particular, it's so many of them who put like I wrote about Joe Hayden, Navarro Bowman. For people who may not necessarily know him, he was a really good linebacker in San Fran. People know about Patrick
He
Willis.
was
They
on
don't
the
know.
Super Bowl team.
Yeah, yeah. The year Kaepernick went, he was on that team. So, and people don't even know because
Who they lost to the Ravens.
yeah, they did. I was rooting for the Ravens, but people don't even know about
My guy.
him. So Sean Merriman, people forget. You know, and then even on my side, like we've had some guys, like, but I wanted to write about public schools because I went to public school, so I played with some guys, I played against some guys. It just made the most sense. And then a friend of mine, Dan Kusin, who I do a podcast with, and he's all through the book too when you read it. He told me something that I needed to hear. He was like, you may not necessarily hit a home run in one book, so you don't have to put a bunch of stuff in there. So, because at first I was like, I was going to throw DC in there. I was going to throw PG, MoCo. I was just going to find any athlete with DMV in their bio, regardless of what school they went to. And it was going to be all over the place. And then when he told me that, it settled me down. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick the 5 schools in MoCo that people know the most, like the ones that I kind of have always been in the picture. And then I'm going to pick a handful of PG County schools as well. And keep it nice and simple, and because it's a lot of people that weren't even in there that probably deserve to be in there, but I'm gonna keep it simple and try to get this idea, and then I'm gonna tell stories of individual seasons as opposed to just all over the place. So it became like a true memoir of the area because I'm talking to people all over the place. So
Yeah, man. I thought it was great. You know, it starts off with Joe Hayden, and Ravens fans know he's been a thorn in their side. First with the Browns, now with the Steelers, which is ironic because he's from down the street. And you think like y'all didn't try to get him, but you bring up Sean Merriman. I actually have one of his jerseys. I never realized he was from the area. I just thought he was a Maryland grad, but I would learn that later. So bringing this book reminded me of that, and I have his jersey. I'm a huge fan of jerseys, and especially if I like the player, and I liked his, and I had to grab that powder blue jersey. But what was it like just trying to make sure you gathered the right information and talking to people? What was that process like? And I know it was a lot. And you brought up, you know, constant writing, cranking out stuff, and you got done in a fair amount of time. And it's of great quality. A lot of times people rush through stuff, but this right here is of great quality. So can you talk about the interview process?
so that was another thing. It was all over the place. When I first started, I would just I use Twitter and Instagram a lot. Like if you're a journalist out there listening to this, those are your two best friends. And I learned that from Jerry Bembry, who he's done a lot of stuff professionally. He
The
said
goat.
that he would use Twitter to reach out to people like if he was on deadline. And I kept that with me. I always just would go through Twitter and find athletes, and a lot of them wouldn't answer, so mainly the ones who were like big time, like a lot of them didn't answer. And so that's kind of when I switched it around. And there would be times where we would agree. There would be people who'd be like, "Yeah, I'm down," and then the interview day would come and they wouldn't answer. Like I wouldn't hear from them. And so like there were a couple schools I wanted to put in there, but their people didn't answer, so they didn't. So they got left out. So you know, but it was surprisingly, even with that being said, it was surprisingly easier than I thought. Like, I mean, the coaches were very happy to help me. There were a lot of players who were very happy to help. Like, it's some people like, man, I'm shout out to you for telling this story. It's about time that somebody does this, and so like it was a lot of different stuff. And the other thing is there were times where I'd be writing a chapter and I just would run into a wall like mentally and be like, I don't know how to finish. And then you would reach out to somebody else who would give me like those answers. So like some chapters have more interviews than others. And it's for that reason, like, oh, different people provided different things, sometimes of the same season, so it'd be different ways to look at it. So it was tedious. And I know I like all my phone got all my voice recordings on it. So like I'd just be out in public. Like people would think I'm listening to music. No, I'm listening to recordings of Coach so and so who I just spoke to like 2 hours before. And I'm just listening to what they're saying and then sitting here writing as they're talking. Like, like I would be like I don't have a car, so I'd just be on the bus, just sitting down. I'll be on the train just writing. Like anytime it came to me. And there were plenty of times that I would start, restart, throw stuff out, like because I consider myself a perfectionist, which I'm trying to get away from. And so it was a lot of starting and restarting, but that's why I didn't want to rush it because I wanted this to be right. Like, I wanted this to be of quality, like you said. So, and in a way, some of the people who didn't respond, it kind of worked out better because of the way that the story ended up going. That like if they would have answered, it just would have like, oh, the story would have gone somewhere that I didn't want it to go. So it kind of worked out both ways.
When you finished it, did you think, I'm never doing this again? Or was there a satisfaction where you said, I can't wait to do the next one?
A little bit of both. It was just like when I finished, I'm like, man, I'm done. I'm about to take a nice little break, But I knew from the start, like this is because of, like I said, what Dan told me, and because there were a bunch of people that didn't make it. I knew this is only the beginning. Like, I want to. When I did DCs, because DC was originally going to be part of it. But then I looked into DC's history, and it's like they got so many high school legends and so many schools, and they play in a totally different school system than Maryland does, that it wouldn't have even done them justice to try to squeeze 2 chapters in to like a 14 or 15 chapter book, you know? So I want to eventually write one about DC by itself, you know? So to all my DC people who are upset you're not in it, that's why, because I want to give y'all more respect than that. And, maybe eventually I want to do Baltimore because they got a lot of football schools up there, Frederick County, they got a lot of really good schools as well. Like it's so much within this state that I eventually want to do. I don't know when, but like it's stuff that I'm thinking of in the back of my head. So
You surprised that Maryland has a richer history? You knew how rich it was. Did you find it was richer once you started tackling this book?
a little bit, like you said, I mean, I kind of, because of the areas I focused on, I knew them for the most, well, I knew MoCo for the most part because you grow up there, you hear the stories, you play in them when you're in high school. So that's stuff that you kind of knew in the back of your head anyway. For the PG side, I definitely was like, man, like we talk about PG being like a talent pool all the time anyway, but I didn't realize how deep. Because like I said, it's a couple schools that definitely probably should have gotten in there that didn't, because the history spans so much. Like, like I didn't even talk about Gwen Park, which is a school they've had a boatload of really good NFL players come out of there, and then their head coach has been there for like 20 years. I didn't even get to talk about them. I didn't talk about Eleanor Roosevelt. So there were some schools that didn't get in there, and then on the MoCo side, it's some other schools that like that didn't get in there because I was trying to keep it recent while also making sure I do it justice. So I was surprised at how much talent that has come, and even the people who haven't come out, just like the talent in the area in general. Like I was surprised at the public school level a little bit, but not too much, just because we tried telling people, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Man. Before we move on, let the people know where they can get the book from.
All right, so you can get the book on Amazon. It's called PG vs. MoCo. That's the official title. So if you just type in PG vs. MoCo, it should pop up. But it's on Amazon. You can get the Kindle as well, the Kindle version. So pretty much that's where you get it at.
Um, but yeah, let's talk about your career at Morgan State because it was a hefty one. Obviously, for those who do not know, when NABJ, that was really the Can you talk about what the organization meant to you?
Yeah. So NABJ, I got love in my heart for them, because they, especially for people who don't know, Dwayne Wickham was one of the founders. You know, so they do a lot of really good work in terms of accessibility and visibility for Black and Brown journalists too. Um, and they do a lot of reach out, and obviously their convention is like second to no one. Like that NABJ convention, I've been to 3 of them now. They do it right every year. Like they treat us good, and it's just amazing to always be around that many successful, talented Black people, who have like interest in me, and doing a bunch of different things. Like you got people, it's not like a monolithic thing either, because you got people who do sports, you got people who do business writing, you got people who do community stuff, and then you got people within those different sections who do different things within that. So, you know, I love it, and I love the locations. They always pick them good. Like the stuff is amazing. It's just a great organization, and being introduced to it in New Orleans of all places was like amazing, especially as a
Oh, that
21.
was your first one?
Yeah, at the time, yeah. So
Yeah, you was the. 'Cause I remember you being like the youngest of the clique.
yeah, no, still am. It's like, well, but yeah.
because that was my return to travel. I went to the one in DC, but that was like my return to travel. And I remember we had the group chat prior
Hmm.
to going. And I think what was so cool was that I was like, wow, I became the OG because obviously I graduated before all y'all. But one of the things I was proud was to see one that y'all had snagged chapter of the year. And I told Tremone Lucas on the podcast earlier, wow, that was this year. I think I was like, wow, he was on here this year. But I had told him
This was a
that,
long year.
yeah, him and Malik Obi, that prior when I went there in 2013 in Orlando, I
Hmm.
said, man, that was really cool. They got student chapters of the year. That was my first one. But the problem was that, they had like Syracuse, Pittsburgh, I think, and other schools. And I was like, man, it'd be cool to see Morgan get that one day. And then to see like not that long,
Right.
literally 4 years later, y'all did
4
it.
years
And I
later.
was like, man, that was like phenomenal. Um, but you also, and you said, you had a great experience. Was it the next year that you went to DR? I think it was
That was that same year. Like that.
the
That was
same
just an
year.
eventful year.
Okay.
That was an eventful year. I think it was either 2017 or 2018. I think it was 2017.
17.
But
Yeah.
yeah. So
So
actually, that summer I spent like 2 months in Dominican Republic studying baseball academies and how. And this is why I'm such a great baseball fan now. Is because of that
let me
trip.
ask you before you get into that. How
Yeah.
big of a fan were you before?
it it was starting to grow. Like it was coming up. I wasn't
Okay.
like where I am now. I wasn't close to where I was back then, or
Okay.
no, the other way around. Where I was back then is not close to where I am now. Back
Hmm.
then, it was still up and coming. Like I was still new to it. My grandfather would take me to like nationals games, so I would learn basically just how to play. Like, oh, you got to run through first, and three outs, and all the. Well, you knew the three
The
outs. That was
basics, yeah.
basic, but no, I was still learning. And then you would hear about like my thing was I always thought it was more Cubans in the NFL. I mean MLB because you would always hear stories about people defecting, like Yasiel Puig or Aroldis Chapman or people like that. And so I didn't really hear too much about Dominicans like that until I went to DR and I realized like the way America loves football, that's how they
Mhm.
love baseball down there. Like because it's the exact same thing. Like and they produce more foreign born baseball players than any other country. So and I learned that when I was down there. And I went to the academies. I saw some of the up and coming players. Like we met some guys who have a little league team. Played with his players who really good. I learned baseball is much harder than it looks. It's very hard to hit a baseball coming at you 90 miles an hour or even 80 miles an hour. Like, it's like a whole
Did you get in the
technique.
cage or step up to the plate?
No, it's like a whole technique and how you got to hit. Like they lift their leg and swing in one full motion. Like it's a lot that goes into it. You
Oh,
know.
that was my favorite sport growing up because that's what I played, Little League.
Yeah.
So as a matter of fact, my mother just gave me my trophies. And I will argue that point you just made that it is harder to hit a baseball than it is to throw a football or make a bass jump shot. And I mean, to me, and this is no disrespect, the jump shot, you either got the range or you don't.
Right.
And then if you got the range, you can work on a technique. That baseball coming at you in the cage, I would put on 80 miles an hour and I couldn't hit it at all. 70 miles was like when I was, a little bit younger, okay. 60
Mhm.
miles was comfortable.
And even still, look at 60 miles. That's like a car, like speeding.
Hmm.
60 miles. Like, like baseball and I grew more respect for it because of that. Cause it's like same thing with track. When I ran track for like one semester as a senior in high school, and I would die after practices. Like, it's the same thing with baseball. Like I could not hit that ball at all. I'm sitting here thinking I'm about to pimp a home run. I'm about to be the man out here. And these 13-year-old kids is out here striking me out in 3 pitches. Like, like not even getting
Oh
close.
wow.
You know,
Wow. So how fast were they throwing at 13?
well, it was a mix. It was like 13, 14, 15, but it was like
Yeah.
around 80, 70, 80, 90 in that range. And he
Wow.
had the guy we
Yeah,
talked to,
good
he had a
stuff.
couple more. Yeah. We got to go to the professional academy, so I helped like soon to be professionals learn to speak English, so it was cool. It was a very different experience. And every time after that, like I would watch baseball and I could like point out, oh, he's Dominican, he's this, he's that. Like the walk up music, and now I love like reggaeton and stuff because and I use baseball as a way to find new music, like to listen to because they have all the Spanish songs. So, it was a very useful experience. And then like right after I came back, like 2 weeks later, that's when I went to NABJ. So that was an eventful
Oh
summer.
man. So you would have enjoyed if saying things would have been the same chronological order, you would have really appreciated NABJ 13 because they had Gary Sheffield and Fred McGriff there. And Ken Griffey Jr. was supposed to be there, but his daughter had surgery, which that disappointed me because he is my favorite baseball player of all time. He's the person who made me fall in love with the sport. But um watching, getting a chance to talk to them. One of the things Gary Sheffield said was there will be, at the time there was black baseball players. He said there'll always be black baseball players, but it'll get to a point where you won't be able to understand them. And a lot of people's like, okay, but when you were there, what was the housing like, and I remember you writing an article which was phenomenal about, baseball, but
Mhm.
what was the housing like down there for you?
So we stayed with host families, like
Okay.
middle, I guess, upper middle class families in the DR. So I stayed, and I still keep in contact with them. Like they're always asking me when I'm coming back. So I'm trying to go back soon. They've been asking me for 3 years now. So we stay in their house. They feed us, every, dinner, breakfast, all that good stuff. You would go to like classes, which for me, the house I lived in was like right up the street. So I would just walk up there. And because I'm black, I could blend in as long as I didn't open my mouth. That's the other thing I loved. Like, and I had a high top fade back then. So I really was like, if I'd have known some Spanish, man, they'd have thought I was one of them. Like, it was that serious. Like, people would see me, and because I was in a group full of like mostly white people would see me and start speaking to me in Spanish, and I'm like, ironically, the only one in the group that doesn't know how to speak Spanish. Like, all the white kids knew how to
Did
speak
you
Spanish.
learn
That was,
some?
I mean, yeah, no, you learn as you go. Like, you figure, and people talk
Okay.
with their hands and stuff. Like, you can figure things out as you go. So,
Because that's what I've never been out of the country yet, and I've always wondered that. Like I've taken, obviously, at Morgan, you have to take a foreign language as a communications major. So I took Spanish class and passed, but I know certain words, and I know, but to be able to put together a sentence, and I had 3 years of Spanish in high school or 3 semesters,
that's the other thing.
but
That's the other thing. Yeah, the what they teach you in class, it is
uh
nothing like that at all. Like nothing. Like you, I was learning Spanish back in 7th grade and was getting
huh.
like A's and B's in Spanish class, like 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and maybe 11th. I can't remember. Like that's 4 years of Spanish. I got to DR and it was, like I'd get to the when you exchange currency at the airport. I get to the airport. They don't speak no English at all. So this lady's talking to me and I'm just like, huh? What? Like just freaking out. you know,
Hmm.
but when I was there for like a month and a half, so eventually you figure some things out. And then one of the friends I met up there or down there, she's from the country. So like I hung out at her house, like I saw how she was living at the time and stuff. And she helped me out and still friends with her too. She's cool people. But she helped as well. So it was a learning experience, but it helps that I was already one of them, so, or in the
I know
diaspora
what you mean.
essentially. So it made things a lot easier. I even got a haircut down there. I almost brought dude back home. It was because the inflation rates and stuff. It was basically
Yeah.
$5 essentially for a haircut, like $5 American for a haircut.
I remember when haircuts was $5.
I paid
You
four
like,
times
wait,
that.
like, huh?
Like I paid 35 now, like for a full
Right.
lineup fade.
Exactly.
I paid $5 for all that down there. Got a line in my head, fresh line up for $5. I almost brought dude back home. Like
Oh man.
it was, I mean, and I
Yeah, that's
love that country. I love that country. And I haven't been there 3 years, and you see how like I can still remember everything. Like I love that country.
I've heard that like at their games, you know how and it's common here in if you go outside and you see a pickup basketball game or football game, it's common to hear like music and everything. I heard it's like that with baseball. When I was playing in a league at ESPN, shout out to my good brother Nelson Sealy. Nelson is Cuban and Dominican, but
Mhm.
he's from Miami. He came to ESPN and he was a highlight producer. And I remember we had a game, and I don't know if you ever played like organized softball. The softball is different because there's so many like rules that you may or may not know. And there was a
Mhm.
rule where apparently somebody had the wrong bat. It was like too much or too light or whatever. And Nelson hits a home run. And then they called it back and he got like upset. And he was like, man, if we was over in the DR and they pulled some mess like that, man, he said somebody fighting. He said, and that was the thing about when Yasiel Puig, because this was the time when I started ESPN was when Yasiel Puig was on like his hype at the height
Yeah,
of his
that's my guy.
career. And
I
me
love that dude.
too. And
Yeah.
he said that he said people just don't understand him because of the way that's the culture down there versus here. So did you see a
And
lot
that's
of that as far as like the hype and stuff?
yes, absolutely. Like that's what I kept saying. And that's the other thing too. So I guess it was a lot of cool things about that trip, but being one of the few people of color who was there, like in my English American group, and you can
Mm-hmm.
see like how they grew up playing it was different than how you know we, because even black people like Tim Anderson, the whole bat flip incident, and you know
Yep.
so that was
I
for
love a
me.
good bat flip.
Yes, me too. Yes, Jose Batista, the greatest one I've ever seen. But
Now I don't like him though. He played for those Blue Jays. He was the enemy of the Orioles, even though he came
yeah,
up through our system. Well, he was in there sometime.
but yeah, that's what they talk. That is the thing down there. Like they you have like conga drums and like the noise makers and they celebrate when they get a hit. They'll
Mhm.
throw the chains be hanging out like grills, all that good stuff. Just love it. I just love it. That's why I
Buck
love it.
tradition.
That's why I root for Dominicans and black players like I do, because they make the game fun. Like, and people want to
Mhm.
talk about all these unwritten rules and stuff and wonder why young fans don't watch the game anymore. And it's because y'all are so rigid. Like, loosen up, please. Like, I remember just from my research at least that it used to be an issue like Jackie Robinson was steal bases, that was seen as like, oh, he's not respecting the game, like essentially back then. So
Yeah.
you see how far we've come now. Now this is the next step. Like, let them wear their chains. Take selfies. Like you see the guy from Atlanta was taking selfies after home runs. You know, Yasiel Puig, they would say that about him. They nicknamed him Wild Horse because they said he couldn't be controlled or whatever. That was a dog whistle, I think. But like yeah, the Dominican players have said that before. Like people, it's a lot of dog whistling where people say stuff like they don't respect the game, like Ken Griffey with the wearing his hat backwards. You know,
Yep.
pretty much anything we grew up on is considered disrespect for the game. I wonder why.
That sounds like a uncomfortable conversation
Yeah.
episode right there.
Yeah.
But and that's the thing, right? There's nothing. I don't care what anybody say. I love a good game-winning shot. I love a game-winning touchdown field goal. But man, ain't nothing like a walk-off home run or a game-winning walk-off grand slam. It's a lot of memories I have. Manny Machado hitting grand slams. I never forget Chris Hoyles used to play for the Orioles. Grand slam against the Seattle Mariners the same night A-Rod hit a grand slam, made the score 13-10 against the O's. Bottom of the ninth inning, Hoyles walks off, and it was the same day his son was born. I remember I got a chance to meet him at a car show, and I was like one of them super fans.
You remember Delman Young? You remember that hit
Oh
against
yeah. Oh, that's in my phone still. The Delman double, and so the crazy. So I'll never forget that one. I was working at ESPN at the time. I had a bet with one of my colleagues, and the bet was because the Tigers had 3 Cy Young Award winners pitching for them: Verlander, Scherzer, and David Price, all who've gone on to win World Series rings, by the way, not with the Tigers. But the bet was if the Orioles won, then the guy Ryan had to bring donuts or bagels for breakfast because we was working on Mike. I was working on Mike and Mike. He was working on Overnight Sports Center, so we was there like early in the morning. Well, I remember the Orioles had took game 1 after like that massive 8th inning. Same the next day, and they were losing. I remember had to go to the bus stop to get my son. I said, "Come on, we gotta get back. The Orioles are playing." And he was 5 at the time. And man, when he hit the ball, that place erupted. Shout out to my guy Patrick Smith, the one I told you who wrote the book. He was there, and he talks about like just the way that like a place like a baseball stadium literally rocks, man. And that's why it's always been like my favorite sport. So it's like,
For
I think
me, no, sorry. Yeah, I was saying for me, the closest thing I got to that was last year. I was at the
Oh
game.
yeah.
You remember? So Juan Soto, I love this man to death. I love that man. Another Dominican player. I was at the game, the wild card game against the what's that team? The Brewers.
Dodgers.
No, the Brewers.
Oh, Brewers. Okay. Oh, the playing game.
Yeah. So I was at that game because my grandfather got connections. He's like that. And so I'm at the game. It was full. And the Nationals at this point, we've had at that point we had the reputation like you get in and then they always blow it. Like, they'd blown it to the Cubs, they blew it to the Giants. They just keep blowing it. They can't get over the hump. And it was looking like it was gonna happen again because they were up 2-0 because they hit a homer early and it was like 2-0. And then I think it was 3-0. And then so it was like you could feel the crowd. Like I've never felt tension like I felt that night. Like it was just 7th inning gets there, still nothing happens. That 8th inning came. I want to say it was 2 outs. We get bases loaded. Soto comes up. And I remember pulling my phone out just because I was like, something is going to happen. I just want to be prepared. And so I got my phone out, still got the video. He hits it. I've never heard a stadium louder than I heard. And I thought we tied the game. We actually went ahead when everything happened. And I was just like, man, because I'm like, are we going to have a Delman Young moment? I specifically was thinking of Delman Young at that moment. Because I'm like, it looked like the same thing. It looked the exact same. It was a 3-run score. And then he throws his hat off and he's chest pumping and stuff. It was, man. And that run last year was incredible. Like every week, it was something different because you remember Howie Kendrick. and the Dodgers. You remember that grand slam?
Mhm.
Like you said, ain't nothing better than a grand slam, you know. Then the World Series comes, and honestly, I'm gonna be real with you. As a diehard Nats fan, I did not think I didn't even think we were gonna beat the Dodgers. I'm
Okay.
gonna be real with you. I didn't think we was gonna beat the Dodgers. And when we beat the Dodgers, I was like, we're going to the World Series. Like, forget St. Louis, forget them. We get there.
Mhm.
I'm like, my thing at that point was I'm just happy to be there. These dudes go up 2-0. I'm like, wait a minute. We could actually win this. And then Houston comes back and I'm like, go back down to earth. Like, all right. Then they win this game. Okay, so game 7 comes and Greinke's just having the game of his life. I'm like, bro, is this we can't end like this. Like, we cannot end like this. And then Howie Kendrick again. And then the rest
Mhm.
is history. Like, you know.
That was amazing, and you know, it's like you're a parent watching their neighbor's child um do something great, and it's like, yeah, you wish your child could do it, but you know, you're happy for your neighbor. It was no way I was rooting for the Astros, and this is before the scandal. I tell people
Yeah.
this: I'm not a fan of dynasties unless it's my team. You know, after seeing one or two, I want to see somebody else. I didn't want to see the Astros win again, even though I know there wasn't a dynasty. I saw what was coming. But I think now the win means even more because y'all were able to overcome trash cans. You
Hmm.
know, y'all
Yep.
were able to overcome trash cans as you was talking and reliving it. I was like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. They played Houston, and Houston was a team that was probably still doing it
Got
at the
caught
time.
doing it. Yeah. Imagine if they would have won. I just
Right.
like that'd have been two because they and Boston got caught doing it too because their manager was on the bench for Houston, so they got caught doing it when the Dodgers lost twice, and that's why it's funny. I'll be like, you see people like when the Dodgers were trying to talk about, oh, they should have their title stripped, and then I remember Nats fans were like, y'all shut up, man, like be quiet.
Mm.
Like wasn't nobody feeling bad for them when they was talking about that. It was like that's why it was just funny. It was like a running joke.
Can you talk about you talk about your grandfather and having that those connections. Talk about the relationship with him. I know he's somebody that means a lot to you and has definitely helped you get into where you are. You talk about the relationship.
Yeah, so definitely that's my guy right there. He works in the same field we work in, so that's part of what made that such a tight bond because his thing is, he wants to help the next generation and like, when you and your grandfather are in the same field, like it's not I don't know how many people can like, besides maybe Joe Buck. And you see how that worked out for him.
Mhm.
you know, so it's it's
Mhm.
it's it's not every day that you get that experience to be able to share that stuff and talk about the things like, you know, and he be telling me stories about stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, like because he is a director and stuff. So he's helped me with a lot of stuff. He's the one that always pays for my NABJ trips. So like every year I go, it was him who was paying for it. So that's the kind of stuff that he's been able to do. He helped me, you know, with a lot of things. And then he sends me people like the connection I got for the undefeated to get that article that I wrote on ESPN. It was him. Like he sent me the guy's contact, and then me and that guy, John Miller, I always send him stuff. Usually he says no, but that time I got lucky and he said yes. So it's through my grandfather that I've met a lot of these people and gotten a lot of these. He even worked with Dwayne Wickham actually. Like
Oh,
he told me like
nice.
before the NABJ days, like they worked together on projects and stuff. So
You ever talk to
yeah,
Mr. Wickham about it?
yeah, no, yeah. Like they always, oh, tell your grandfather I said hello. It's like, all right, you know. So it's
Yeah.
amazing. Like it's a small world, really.
When you look back, man, I mean, I just think that's amazing. I lost my grandfather, both of them. One before I was born, and the other at a very early age. And I've been blessed with a guy who's assume the role of a grandfather to me. He was talking about he was on an episode Uncomfortable Conversations, and he talked about athletes and activism and how he was proud of LeBron. And those are relationships they're priceless. What was his reaction when you wrote the book?
Oh, well, I'm about to find out because I see him later. But they were they were no, he was really happy, and it different things. Every now and then he doesn't cry a lot, but like he every now like certain events happen
Mhm.
and it'll get him to tears, like when I graduated, obviously, you know, and
Yeah.
things like that. But it's always cool, and that's why I try to, like you said, I don't know how much time I have with him, so I gotta cherish these moments. That's why we did a podcast together, kind of similar to what you did, where I just wanted to talk to him about coming up around, like he was telling me about like going to Howard University in the 60s, like what that was like. And I did a whole podcast episode like based off of that with him and my grandmother. So things like that I tried, and I wanted to do something like you did about the sports because he's a big baseball fan. Obviously, he saw people like Kareem and Jackie Robinson and Jim Brown, all those good folks. So he
Yeah,
it's
I'm looking forward to that. As a fan of yours, I'm sitting there like, do it, do it, do it. Cause like I said, I know the
yeah, yeah,
relationship
yeah.
and how
So
it's a blessing, man. And being able to you have a cheat code that a lot of
right.
people don't have.
That's what I'm saying. Especially like I want to tell as many stories about his that I can because it this is like straight from the source. Like,
Mhm.
he was there.
There's your
I
next
remember
book.
exactly. Yeah, I was gonna write one about him. But he was telling me like from the podcast I did, he was telling me about like he remembers the day Martin Luther King was assassinated. He was talking about how DC basically he was in his dorm room talking to his college girlfriend at the time and he saw smoke coming from his window and then he went downtown and sees like the whole block is just ablaze. Like it's just and he was telling me he went into a store. It was like a grocery store and he went in there and like it was trashed. Like it was, you could smell the tear gas in the air. Like, and he was worried about potentially being killed because like if you get caught in there, they'll think you're looting. So like, I mean, just stories like that. Like that's stuff I can't get from a textbook. You know, it's like straight from it. And I feel
Yeah,
like
because they
everybody who has their grandparents with them, you got to tell
Mhm.
those stories, keep those stories alive because as we see this year, like you never know when your time is.
Yeah, and they whitewashed our history. You
Yep.
know, they don't. My wife is a social studies teacher at an all boys school, primarily black. I think it might actually be all black. And I asked her, I said, "So, are you going to teach? How are you?" I said, "Are you going to teach history the way you want to?" And she was kind of given a green light to do so,
Right.
to be able to teach people. So, um, yeah, man, I definitely love that the fact that you do um share your grandfather with the world in a sense. But podcasting, you've done, like I said, you've done more writing than a lot of people have at your age, and you humble about it, but you're my boy, and I'm not humble when it comes to my friends. You're the truth of what you do. But you've also gotten the podcasting, and a lot of times we always see people want to get out there and they want to talk. They want to talk sports, right? They see these magazine shows, so that's what they and Professor Milton Kent, not a fan
Right.
of shows like First Take. I used to sit there. Shout out to Professor Kent. I used to
Right.
sit there in
I gotta send
Mr.
him the book
Wickham's
too.
office. Yeah, definitely. And he
Yeah.
would walk past and be like, oh man, I can't stand that. That's not journalism. But you took the old school approach, developing yourself as a writer and then allowing that to develop your speaking voice. When did you decide, like, yes, I am going to do this and create the play-by-play analysis?
All right. So that was something it- that's another one of those things, like the blessing in disguise of having this extra time, because that was something I kept putting off. I kept procrastinating, and even though that happened before the pandemic, but it was an app that a friend of mine showed me because he had started a podcast, and I'm like, well, how'd you do it? And he had gotten it on Apple, and I'm like, how'd you do it? And he was like, oh, it's this app called Anchor, and it's free, and it's on Apple, or it's on the Apple Store. And so I looked it up, but like I said, I was procrastinating, so like I never really. I would look at it and be like, all right, I'm gonna do it later, and then around, I want to say, right after I crossed and became a Sigma, I decided, look, I'm gonna do this. This is something I'm gonna do. Like in the year 2021, I wrote down. I mean, not 2021. What year is this? 2020. I wrote down like a list of goals of like what I'm gonna accomplish this year, and one of them was to start a podcast. And so I finally got around to, let's look at Anchor. Let's see what they're talking about. And it was actually like really easy, and I was like, I was trying to think of names, and then I'm like, my nickname from being a Sigma is Play by Play because they knew about my sports writing and my all that stuff, so they gave me that nickname. And I'm like, you know what? Let me brand this because it's my name, it's unique. Let's turn this into something. So Play by Play analysis, because it play on words, and it came about. And then my thing was, I didn't want to just do sports. I wanted to talk about everything, sports, culture, everything, because I get my inspiration from different areas, like your show, my guy Jarrell,
Mhm.
Dapper J. I listened to his show a lot, so I took elements from his show. So it just came about, and I wasn't sure how I was going to do it because I'm by myself. I don't have like a true co-host. So it's basically like, oh, I call people up, like when I called you up. I call people up like, hey, you
Yep.
want to do this show? And they're like, yeah, let's do it. And then like 12,000 plays or 1,200 plays later, here we are. So just usually it's all about kind of like just taking risks, I guess. You can't be scared of failing.
When you sit back and you think about podcasting, what's been your favorite part about it? We see a lot of people think it's easy. A lot of people say,
Mhm.
"Oh man, I'm gonna create a podcast." And when people come to me, the first thing I say is, "Can you be consistent? Do you have a outline of your schedule, how you want to do things?" What's been your favorite part about it?
Um, I would say how surprisingly, like for me, coming up with stuff to talk about hasn't been too difficult for me because when I started it, I'm like, well, what am I going to talk about? And then it's like every day, boom, something that happened. Boom, let's talk about this. Boom, let's talk. And the conversations I have, I think, like just being able to be myself, um, having an avenue to express my ideas to people, and having people like, oh yeah, I agree with that, or like, and we just can have an area to talk about stuff, and it's another way to add to ideas, because I feel like not everything is going to necessarily have to be written. Some things, you got to sit down with your boys and like, let's talk about this. you know um
Mhm.
so I think that's been the coolest thing. It's just the number of things I've been able to talk about and being able to show my versatility.
Would you say it's
Like,
introduced you to a different set of people?
um, I don't, I don't, I kind of like a little bit, but at the same time, it's like just showing people what kind of has been here already. Like, I'm more than just a sports guy. That was me a few years ago. Now I can talk about sports, and I can also break down this new album coming out, or I can talk about anything really. I mean, especially the show with my grandfather. That was something I really wanted to do, because it's like, well, this guy is just racking up these ideas. This is stuff that other people may eventually follow. Or if I got it from them, maybe people build on it. So that's been the cool thing.
Yeah, Devin, man, I really appreciate you taking time. It's been a long time coming.
Mhm.
And I said, but I told you a long time. I was like, yeah, I gotta get you on the show. I gotta get you on the show. Apparently did it at the right time. The book is out, folks. Make sure y'all check it out. It's a memoir, but it's also, like I said, I could see this in book fairs. Somebody was tweeting and posted about back in the day, you walked in like Vince McMahon if you had $7 going into the book fair
Right.
in elementary school because you just
That was
felt
me.
good. But I could, man, I could definitely see this in book fairs. I mean, it's so much history right here. And I want to see these athletes really take appreciation to this, because you really
I gotta
highlight
ask
and
I got just from the how far in it are you?
I just started, man. I just got through chapter 1 with Joe Hayden.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you had
Yeah,
finished yet.
I'm nah, not yet. I will.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I definitely like I said, I like it. Obviously I did the flip through. I really like obviously the pictures, but I like the format as well because it's easy read. So
Right.
that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about the read about the people that I didn't know about, that because we all went to school with people, and of course when you're in high school you're looking at like, oh yeah, they're gonna be the next big thing, or they're gonna be the next big thing. So, and to now have the insight knowing that you were on the field and you got to have that different lens, as opposed to somebody like a Sam Smith or somebody who's just walking and taking notes, or Skip Bayless, who was just, all right, I'm taking notes. Yeah, I'm a journalist, I'm a reporter, but you were a player, so you got to see it from a player's lens. So I'm excited about
Right.
that, man.
And I think the other thing too, this to all the bench warmers out there, pay attention.
Mhm.
When coach yell at you because you're not paying attention, just because you're not playing doesn't mean you can't talk about it later. Like that was my thing. It was like, this, like the MoCo side, I mean the research, like, yeah, I did research obviously for like the schools I didn't go to, but I knew most of those stories just off of the fact that, like, I was there. I'm sitting here watching the game. Like, like, this happened. I remember when this happened. I remember the reaction when such and such happened. Like, and I really wanted to talk about my home area too, because I feel like even more so, they get underlooked. I feel like in the grand scheme of things, like PG, we know they got it going on. Most of the superstars in the area have come out of PG, but I feel like there have been plenty of guys they played with or played against who were just as good, but they just didn't get big time. But I mean, they still went to school though. And that was
Mhm.
that
Yeah,
was my thing. It was like I wanted to tell something substance. Like I wanted to do something different. So it's gonna be some stuff in there that, like, when you read it, hopefully when you read it, you'll be like, man, I remember that play. Because some of the guys that did make it, like, you'll see what I'm talking about when you read it. But
all right. Well,
yeah.
I'm definitely excited about it. Yeah, folks, make sure y'all check it out. Go get the book, support the brother. Devin, when all this ends, I need to get mine signed so I
Oh
can
yeah, I
have
got
the exclusive $1 million signature, and I won't sell
you.
it.
All right.
I'm not gonna sell it. I don't I like to collect things personalized. That
Yeah,
way
yeah, I feel
it's to
that.
me. Yeah.
I f-
But let the people know where they can find you.
All right, so y'all can find me and the link to the book on Twitter. J Jackson is my Twitter name, so it's 2J's AXYN, and there's no story behind it. That was just some name I came up with. But again, 2J's AXYN, J Jackson, and then on Instagram I'm Devon_Javon, JAVON, and my first name is spelled with an O, not an I, so it's DEVON_JAVON on Twitter. So, and the link, like I said, the link to everything is in both. So, yeah.
And if you search his name on Amazon like I did, boom, it's gonna come right up.
Right. Yeah.
All right, man. I definitely appreciate you coming on. Definitely looking forward to getting in this book as well as more episodes of the play-by-play analysis.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in this episode. Really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Devon Asbhy. Make sure y'all pick up the book, PG vs. MoCo County. And I got another book for you to pick up. Next week, I'm bringing on author, another former Morgan State University graduate, straight from Baltimore, Maryland, Albert Phillips Jr. He just wrote the book, Y'all Hiring? It's a guide for teenagers as they really start to look how to land that first job. So make sure y'all check that out. Of course, I got my copy of that one as well. So make sure y'all support the brother, Albert Phillips, and get ready for that episode coming up next week. Folks, thank you for all your support. I really appreciate you spreading the word about the podcast. Can't express how much that means to me. I've been blessed to share my network of great people with the world. So make sure y'all continue to do so and tell them to hit the subscribe button. Till the next time, remember, don't let anybody set up a glass ceiling that you can't break through. This podcast was recorded and edited by B Waters Productions. The music by Hypno Beats. Make sure you follow him at Hypno_Beats with a Z on Instagram.